In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, my Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me and that you hear me. I adore your profound reverence. I ask you pardon for my sins and to grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Today, let us reflect on a very peculiar miracle from the Gospel of St. Mark. A miracle that, unlike so many others, unfolds not in an instant but in stages. It is the healing of the blind man at Bethsaida. This story, brief as it is, offers profound lessons about the way God works in our lives, about faith, about patience, and about the slow, sometimes painful, but ultimately loving process of true healing. Let me read to you the gospel passage. St. Mark chapter 8, verses 22 to 26. They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" The man looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. This account stands out because, unlike most miracles in the Gospels, the healing here is not immediate. The Lord made two attempts. It is a gradual process, not instantaneous. And in this process, we see reflected the way God often works in our own lives. In the New Testament, we are used to Jesus healing with a word, a touch, or even a look. The leper says, "Lord, if you will, you can make me clean." And immediately he is cleansed. The paralytic is told to rise, take up his mat, and walk, and he does so at once. The woman with a hemorrhage touches the hem of Jesus' garment, and instantly her bleeding stops. But here, something different happens. Jesus touches the man's eyes, but his vision is only partially restored. He sees people, but they appear as blurry shapes. Trees walking, he said. Only after a second touch does the man's sight become clear. This is the only miracle in the Gospels that unfolds in stages. And its very strangeness invites us to pay close attention. We ask, why this gradual healing? Did Jesus lose his power? Was the man's blindness too much, too great, too difficult for the Lord? Of course not. The answer lies not in any limitation on the part of the Lord, but in what he wishes to teach us about the nature of faith, about the reality of spiritual growth, and the way God heals the deepest wounds of our hearts. Notice first how personal Jesus is in this encounter. The text tells us that some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. The Lord could have healed the man with a word right there on the spot before the crowd, but instead he does something intimate. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. Here is the Good Shepherd in action. The Lord doesn't see the man as a statistical case, a problem or a number in the crowd. No, he sees him individually. He hears him. He comes to him, takes him by the hand, and leads him away from the noise and distraction into a place of solitude, alone with God. Isn't that what all of us long for? To be truly seen, truly heard, truly cared for? Not as part of the masses, but as a unique individual. The Lord meets us where we are. He doesn't apply generic remedies like a psychiatrist who prescribes the same antidepressant medicine regardless of the patient's case. No, the Lord tailors his approach to our unique story, our particular need, our individual wound. If you have ever felt lost in the crowd, overlooked or unheard, we have to know this. The Lord sees you. He listens to your prayer. He comes to you, not with a quick fix, but with a hand that leads you gently, personally toward healing. But let us not overlook another detail. Some people brought a blind man to Jesus, the gospel says. The blind man did not come on his own. How could he see? He needed others to lead him. He needed friends, family, perhaps even strangers to carry him to the Lord. That is a powerful reminder that we are not self sufficient. We need one another. God often heals us through the hands, words, and love of other people. Friends, mentors, parents, pastors, children, even those we least expect can become instruments of grace, helping to open our eyes. I've known people who discovered faith, who returned to the church, who found truth itself, all because of the quiet influence of their children. It may not be the most common path to conversion, but it happens. Sometimes grace reaches the parents through the hearts of the little ones. I knew a family in Italy, wealthy family, who one day organized a holiday trip to an exclusive island. And then their little boy, who was 8 years old, said, "Mom, wait a minute. Is there church there? How can we go to Mass on Sunday?" And that made them think. The parents, they were so amazed. Well, because the boy had been receiving catechesis in school. That was the beginning of their conversion, the parents, and the return to the church, thanks to the little boy. We ask ourselves, how often have you been carried by the faith of another? How often has someone's encouragement, prayer, or simple presence brought you closer to healing? And in turn, how often have you been called to carry someone else, to intercede, to accompany, to inspire, to teach, to guide a friend or loved one to Jesus? Healing is not a solitary journey. We are made for community. The faith of others can open doors that we cannot open ourselves. Let us be grateful for those who have brought us to Jesus, and let us be willing to do the same for others. Before the healing begins, the Lord leads the blind man away from the village. Why? Why not heal him in public, where all could see? But sometimes before God heals us, He must first lead us away from the crowd, from distraction, from curious people, from the noise that blinds us. He brings us into a place of silence, of solitude, of intimacy. In the quiet, we can begin to see. Oftentimes, it is in those quiet, hidden places that the deepest healing begins. It could be in front of the tabernacle, in a little corner, at home. There, stripped of distraction, we meet the Lord face to face. There, He shows us who we truly are and who He truly is. During the pandemic, when everything slowed down and silence filled the streets, there was a young woman in New Jersey. I was then living in the United States. She used to spend her days with friends, always hanging out, always moving. Faith wasn't really her thing. That belonged to her parents, who prayed daily and went to Mass every day. And the family kept a crucifix hanging in the living room. It had always been there, unnoticed, part of the furniture of her childhood. But during the long months of lockdown, something changed. Confined at home, she passed that crucifix every day, morning, afternoon, evening, and slowly it began to speak to her. At first, she simply looked. Then she paused. Then she began to whisper a few words, small, uncertain prayers. It felt as though In the stillness, the Lord was inviting her to talk, to come closer. And when the lockdown finally ended, she did something new. She went to church. Not because somebody told her, but because she wanted to. That quiet encounter, repeated day after day in her living room, became the turning point of her faith. In solitude, in stillness, in the ordinary space of her own home, she met God, and He met her. Perhaps you are in such a season, a time of isolation, uncertainty, or quiet. It may feel like exile, but it could be an invitation to step away from the village so that Jesus can restore your eyesight, in a manner of speaking. Now comes the most peculiar part of the story. The Lord spits on the man's eyes and lays his hands on him. Why such an earthy, almost messy method? Why not simply speak the word? Well, sometimes, the Lord heals us through the ordinary, even awkward means of life. A word from a friend, a confession, a Eucharist received in faith, a small act of obedience, a tear shed in prayer. Grace is not always elegant or expected. It comes through the humble, tangible moments of real life. God's grace is incarnate. He stoops to our level. He uses what is human, physical, and ordinary to bring about what is divine. The healing of our spiritual blindness may not always look miraculous on the surface. It may come through therapy, honest conversation, daily prayer, or the slow work of forgiveness. But in these moments, God's touch is no less real. And so we should not despise the messy, quote unquote, the messy ways God chooses sometimes to heal you. Sometimes healing comes clothed in the very earthiness of our humanity. After the first touch, Jesus asks, "Do you see anything?" The blind man looks up and says, "I see people, but they look like trees walking around." His sight is only partially restored. How true this is in our spiritual life. Sometimes we begin to see, but not yet clearly. We begin to believe, but our faith is still blurry. We catch glimpses of God's presence, but it is as if through a fog. This is the experience of conversion. It is a process, not an event. We do not go from blindness to full vision overnight. Our wounds, be it spiritual, emotional, psychological, take time to heal. Faith grows gradually, like the dawn creeping over the horizon. There may be times when you feel stuck, seeing only trees walking. Well, do not be discouraged. You are in good company. Even the man in the gospel healed by Jesus himself had to wait for the second touch. God's grace is patient and persistent. The important thing is to stay close to the Lord, to allow Him to keep working, to receive His touch again and again. Some of us carry deep hurts, rejection, betrayal, loss, guilt, failure, whatever. We may have prayed over them, confessed them, forgiven others, yet the pain returns. Does this mean that we have not been healed? Not at all. It means the healing is still happening. In the same way that the blind man's sight was restored in stages, God restores our hearts in stages. He respects our freedom. He works with our cooperation. Healing is a dance between divine grace and human response. We may wish for an instant change, but God desires deep change. Instant change can be superficial. Deep change is lasting. The message is clear. Do not rush the process. Healing takes as long as it takes. God is with you at every step, guiding and strengthening you, even when you cannot see the process. The blind man doesn't resist Jesus. He allows Jesus to touch his eyes, even in a strange way. He doesn't question the method. The Lord spitting on his eyes? That's rather strange. But the man had faith in the Lord. He trusts the healer. Faith and obedience open the door to healing. Sometimes in our confession, the spiritual director tells us something that we don't believe, that we are not convinced of. It doesn't make sense. But then deep down, with faith, with humility, we thought, well, let me give it a try. After all, he is a minister of Christ. And many times in the past, when I trusted in myself too much, then I made a mess of myself. We can repair what seems irreparable if we have faith. We can change what seems unchangeable if we trust the Lord's timing. Sometimes we are tempted to tell God how to heal us. Lord, not that way. Lord, I want you to do this for me. But true healing begins when you surrender. Lord, I don't understand, but I trust you. Do whatever you must, even if it is strange, even if I don't understand. Just give me faith. Healing, therefore, is not passive. It requires our cooperation. We must let ourselves be led, touched, and transformed. We must be willing to obey even when we do not comprehend totally the plans of God. Back in the days before the advent of digital cameras, imagine a photograph being developed in the dark room. At first you see nothing, only blank paper. But slowly, as the image bathes in light and time, shapes begin to emerge. Outlines, shadows, faces, clarity. When I was a little boy, I saw that process and I thought, wow, it's magic. But there's a scientific explanation for that. Well, that is what Jesus does with us. He is the divine photographer, so to speak, and we are his developing image. The dark room is not a punishment, it is a process. In darkness, the image forms. One day, the light will make it complete. The man of Bethsaida was still in the dark room of grace. He could see something, but not clearly. Christ didn't rush the process. He let faith develop until the image of the truth came into full light. Now, there is a phrase in this gospel that is full of mercy. Once more, Jesus put his hands on man's eyes. Jesus is not discouraged by the partial result. He doesn't give up. He touches the man again. How many of us need that once more today? Once more, Lord, give me faith. Once more, my Jesus, heal my heart. Once more, oh my God, open my eyes to see you clearly. Once more, please forgive me. One more time. The Lord is patient. He will touch us as many times as it takes. He doesn't tire of us, even when we are slow to believe, slow to respond, slow to change. He gives us another chance and another and another. If you are discouraged by the slowness of your growth or the persistence of your wounds, take heart. The Lord is not done with you. He will continue his work until it is complete. And finally, the gospel says, then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. That is God's desire for us. Not partial healing, not halfway recovery, but full clarity. A total communion with the Lord, total conversion. To see clearly is to see God, others, and ourselves in the light of truth and love. It is to see as Jesus sees, with compassion, with faith, with supernatural outlook, with charity. Notice, the man can now see Jesus face to face. That is the ultimate goal of all healing, not merely physical or emotional restoration, but communion with Christ, seeing him as he is. In fact, in heaven, that is what we call the beatific vision, being able to see God face to face. Clarity of vision is not simply about the eyes, but about the heart. It is a gift of faith, a supernatural way of seeing, unmarred by ignorance, bias, or fear. The Lord often leads us, as St. John of the Cross described, along an inclined plane, step by step. upward, slowly, patiently. We may not notice progress day by day, but when we look back, we realize how far we have come. God's grace is not a switch that flips instantly. It is a sunrise, slowly illuminating everything until the full day. If you feel like your progress is slow, remember, even the highest mountains are climbed by small, steady steps. Trust the process. God is bringing you to clarity, to fullness, to light. This lesson of gradual healing is not just for ourselves. It is an invitation for us to be more patient and understanding toward others. Think of your own child who takes time to mature. Think of your elderly parent who may need you to repeat things, to speak more slowly, to say twice, thrice, to guide them gently. One day, we will probably be in their position, needing others to help us make even a small step. Healing, especially psychological, emotional, or spiritual healing, often takes a long time. We cannot expect people to change overnight. We must learn to stand beside them with patience, as Jesus did with the blind man. He did not perform a quick miracle and move on. He accompanied him, led him by the hand, stayed with him through the process. That is divine patience. That is the patience of love. Sometimes a person's healing is slowed by doubt, fear, or even a lack of faith. Jesus doesn't abandon them, nevertheless. He awaits until faith awakens. The same is true in our relationships. We can encourage, guide, and pray, but each heart must freely open itself to God's touch. When someone you love seems stuck, do not judge too quickly. You may not see the silent battle they are fighting inside. Offer understanding instead of pressure, presence instead of demands. Be patient, put yourself in their shoes, and let love be your guide. Now, going back to the gospel passage, after healing the man, Jesus sends him home saying, "Don't go back into the village." And we ask why. What harm could there be in returning to where he came from? Perhaps as a metaphor, it means do not go back to what blinded you. Do not return to the old ways, the habits, the patterns of thought or behavior that kept you in darkness. You have been healed. You are not the same person anymore. When the Lord restores our sight, when He touches our eyes and hearts, He calls us to live differently. He doesn't want us to dwell in the same places of sin, of resentment, of bitterness, of regret. He says, go home, begin anew. After conversion, the temptation is to look back, to revisit the past, to reopen old wounds, remain attached to what once enslaved us. But the Lord is clear, do not go back there. Do not return to the village of blindness. How beautiful. You have a new direction now. You have seen the light. Walk forward in that light, step by step, eyes open, guided by the Lord's hands. Let me share the story of Michael, a U.S. Marine whose life and faith were deeply shaken by war. After witnessing the death of his closest friend in Afghanistan and having killed many people himself in combat, Michael returned home haunted by trauma, grief, and guilt. He felt abandoned by God and he stopped praying, overwhelmed by the darkness he carried inside. One day, while visiting a veterans center, Michael met an old priest who simply listened to his story without judgment. After hearing Michael's pain, the priest quietly said, "You're right, my son. I don't know what you have seen, but I know Christ has seen it all, and he still loves you." That moment became a turning point. Michael didn't suddenly feel healed, but it was as if a small light had entered his darkness. Like the blind man of Bethsaida, his journey toward healing was slow and gradual. He started praying again, The nightmares and guilt didn't vanish overnight, but gradually they became lighter burdens he could entrust to God. Years later, Michael said, I still see the shadows, but now I also see the light behind them. His story is a reminder that healing rarely happens all at once, but step by step, with God walking patiently beside us. St. Augustine wrote, Faith is the beginning of true sight. Without faith, even those who see are blind. Augustine saw blindness as a symbol of the heart's ignorance, and faith as the light that makes true vision possible. The second touch of Christ, he said, is a grace perfecting faith. What we begin to understand dimly, God brings to completion through love. What does this miracle teach us? That God's power is not limited by time, that His way of healing is personal, patient, and deep, that faith and obedience allow grace to unfold, that even when healing is gradual, slow, step by step, in stages, it is very real. Just be patient. The man who once saw nothing ended up seeing clearly. So will we, if we allow the Lord to lead us, to touch us, a second time, a third time, a fourth time, the nth time. Let us say a short prayer together. Lord, touch my eyes once more. Help me to see as you see. Heal my wounds, even if it takes time. Teach me to trust you in the process of healing. And when I see clearly, help me to guide others to your light. Our wounds, especially the deep ones, often take time. The process of healing is not rushed. It unfolds gently in God's rhythm. What matters most is that God is with us in the process, accompanying us, touching us, healing us in His own way and time. Some wounds, the scars of the past, the emotional, psychological pain, the memories that shaped us, do not simply vanish. They may fade, but they often remain part of who we are. Think of someone learning to walk again after an accident. The first steps are shaky, uncertain, partial. But with continued guidance and a therapist's patient hands, strength and clarity return. Faith, too, is a kind of rehabilitation. God walks with us through the process, touching us again and again until we can see life, ourselves, and others as He does. We can't hasten the process. We must respect the time frame and be patient with ourselves and with others. We cannot overemphasize this idea that healing takes time. The Lord never abandons us halfway. He doesn't heal us once and then leave. He stays with us. He walks with us. He watches over us. He is never too busy to stay by our side. Therefore, we must not be impatient. We must not insist that change happen overnight. The Lord works quietly, gradually, until our sight is fully restored. Let us then allow Him to lead us, to take us by the hand and guide us, even if we do not see where He is taking us. To trust that every step has a purpose. To rest in the assurance that though we may still walk half light, we are held firmly by the One who is the light of the world. And as we ponder this story of gradual healing, the blind man of Bethsaida, we can turn to the Blessed Virgin Mary, she who saw clearly from the beginning because her heart was pure and undivided. When our vision is still blurred, when faith feels slow to grow, we can ask her to take us by the hand, as she once held her Son, and lead us to Him. She teaches us the patience of grace, to wait, to trust, and to let Jesus touch our eyes again, until we too can see everything clearly. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.